Well, perhaps we should get started. The clock says 11:01. So welcome to everyone. We are very grateful for your time and attention. And for those of you who may be in the news media, I have to apologize again for the late notice. Can't say anything more than I did already. This will be the first of a couple of these seminars this month. There really could be more, but it is December, and that's a difficult month for many of us. My name is Greg Mello. I'm the executive director of the Los Alamos Study Group, which is a small nonprofit in Albuquerque that works on nuclear weapons policy mostly. My partner and co-worker is behind me, Trish, who will be helping us. Hopefully, she will be able to unmute people when they raise their hands when we have a Q&A time, and try to weed out any hackers which might drop in, which has happened before. And it wasn't so easy last time to stop that, but she'll do her best. We will be very informal. There aren't going to be slides this time. So I will be referring to written materials in front of me, which most of which are on our website or will be soon. Ask me about references, please. Make a note and ask me when there's an opportunity. And hopefully there will be all of this in writing by next time, although I have to say it's a very complex body of information. And I think I should emphasize right at the beginning that it's so complex and we are all so very finite and it's confusing. It's meant to be confusing, and there are barriers of classification and political barriers. So all of us are going to be continuously surprised by new information. I know I am. And we have to forgive each other for not understanding. There are no dumb questions. And especially for journalists who are perhaps just dipping their toes in this for the first time, it's a contested terrain in addition to all the other issues. Let's see. Maybe, honey,
Yes.
Could we turn the overhead light on if it's not too?
Sure.
See if it works out. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
The dominance of contractors in the business also adds to the informational problem, because they are not federal employees and they have their own interests. They do about 97% of the work of NNSA, so it's a unusually privatized business. Now, let's see. Before getting started, I want to mention that their NNSA has put out a pretty good fact sheet on pit production, which you can find on their website. I believe from a news article that it is dated June, although I don't see that immediately on the website. It's actually fairly factual. I don't think it's complete, but I don't see any outstanding errors, and I commend it to you. Again, it's a pit production fact sheet on the NNSA website. So I want to go over, say, the 5+1 topics that we mentioned. We mentioned 5, and I've added one, which is cost. But so you can, please, I'll try to stop after each one, and then we'll have some questions and comments, and then we'll proceed down to the others. And if you want to ask anything about any of the material that was in the press release, please do that also at any time. I'll have to meter the time so that we can get to this, and there'll be a lot of overlap. Oh dear, blinking, hun. We have a defective light fixture. So, you know, I don't want to give the impression that we are just trying to be critical of all the hardworking people out there. So we did produce what we thought were some papers, a couple of papers on what we thought a normative pit production policy should be. And those are on our website on the pit page in the featured section. And they are dated in June. There have been more information available since June, so they're slightly dated, but not too bad. Let's see. Okay, I would like to make some general observations from part 2 of what we wrote then toward a viable pit production plan. And let's see. No, I think I'm going to skip that and return to it later because it just drops into the details. We'll go straight to number 1. What is the real purpose of pit production at LANL? And I said at LANL because I wanted to focus on pit production in the near term. Jill Ruby has tasked the SRS pit people to reach a first production unit of pits by 2035. After that, production will ramp up, but let's say 2036 is currently the earliest date for full production at SRS, and that's optimistic under present assumptions. At Los Alamos, there is supposed to be a certifiable or proof of concept pit late this fiscal year, with the first war reserve pit next year. So that's there's roughly a 1-decade lag between from Los Alamos pit production to Savannah River pit production. And that lag is important from the policy perspective, and I think it is overlooked by many people. There's misunderstandings about this, and often the two sites are treated as if because work and investment is going on in both places, that the production is implicitly more or less the same time. That's not true. As someone remarked to me in government, the primary justification for the smaller, more expensive, more ephemeral, and more problematic Los Alamos pit production is the speed with which pit production can be brought forward at LANL, presumably. LANL pit production is about 6 years behind its committed schedule of just 2 or 3 years ago. So 30 years, it was supposed to be 30 pits per year by 2026. Now, the earliest that 30 pits per year reliable is likely to be seen at LANL is March of 2032, as you can find in the press release sent out earlier. So what is the real purpose of this early to need pit production? Why do I say early to need? because all parties believe, are sure, there's a consensus that none of the pits are aging out at this moment. So over the next decade, pit aging is not an issue. Over the next decade, the W-78 warhead could still be deployed on Minuteman missiles because it will take a full decade, almost 9 years, let's say, to replace Minuteman III with Sentinel, assuming that goes forward, which is the program of record at this point. So, what's the purpose here? The purpose, I think it's important to notice that the W-78 is not as accurate a warhead as is the W-87. So the W-87-0 is going to be equipped with a new smart fuse starting this year. So it's already more accurate than the W-78, but it's going to be equipped with a smart fuse starting this year, which will make it, to some degree, more accurate still. The excellent paper by Ted Postel and Hans Christensen of some years ago in maybe 2015 in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and Matt McKenzie is really an important reference point on this. And there'd been very little press about the installation of smart fuses in the W-87-0s. I can provide that information at another time. They're making enough smart fuses to put in all the W-87-0s. As you know, there's enough W-87-0s to populate the entire ICBM fleet as well as the extra 50 silos. So, and the W-87 is a relatively modern warhead that will last until at least the 2050s or into the 2060s. So there's no need to replace the W-87-0s for pit aging purposes, nor is there any need for another weapon to populate the entire Sentinel system. If it's to be limited to one warhead per missile. That's what we have now, one warhead per missile, but we have the option to MIRV or add 2 extra warheads to about half the missiles, but those are the less accurate W-87 warheads. The Sentinel system will not be, there'll be no option to carry the older W-78 warheads. That would be another design task, and as someone said, analogous to putting a flip phone or an analog phone on the missile instead of a modern iPhone 15 or whatever. They're just not going to do it. So but the Sentinel will be able to carry, we believe, 3 warheads, 3, and they would be either the W-87-0, which will be the first warhead to be deployed on them, or the W-87-1. We have, I have to look here, fine print over on the wall, but maybe 520, 530 W-87-0s, roughly. And using those and the W-87-1s, which are to be built with new pits, it will be possible to MIRV the Sentinel system. If the Sentinel system were fully MIRVed, it could be deployed including the standby silos, with up to 1,350 warheads, which is way more than the present deployment of 400 warheads. This is more or less the direction that the Congressional Commission on Strategic Posture just recommended. So that's the tie-in. So the early time production of pits for the new very accurate warhead augments the existing supply of very accurate warheads to enable the heavy MIRVing of the Sentinel system. Now, if you look at the numbers over time, Los Alamos production is nowhere near enough to accomplish all that MIRVing. So SRS would have to kick in to achieve that a large number of MIRVed Sentinels. And there is this little sag in the middle of the 2030s, much as the Congressional Commission warned about. They want even more pit production, as they say there, because of this, what they believe to be an unwise dependence on just-in-time delivery of those systems. So the point is that for warfighting purposes, the more accurate warheads enable the use of one warhead instead of two or three to target a hardened facility in Russia or China. So accuracy on that level is a force multiplier. As Ted Postel, starting in the late 1990s, pointed out, one very accurate warhead with a smart fuse and optimum detonation is worth 2 or even 3 less accurate ones for taking out a hardened silo of 10,000 psi hardness, for example. The warfighting theory is basically that Russia would have to expend most of its arsenal with less accurate weapons to take out US ICBMs, while we could do the same to Russia with only a fraction of our arsenal, leaving us with extras. Therefore, we win the nuclear war. We could use our continuity of government mechanisms and to dictate terms at that point. Now, that sounds silly, but the fact is that if you ask the Pentagon to decide how to conduct a nuclear war, they have no choice but to figure out how to win a nuclear war. So crazy as it is, that's the implication of nuclear weapons at all. Well, Russia, as you know, feared a devastating first strike, which some people in this country wrote about. Let's see, a little hard today. What were that? Those authors, 2 authors. Some of you will know. Therefore, Russia developed systems which would survive. And Russia developed the perimeter dead hand system, so that even if Russia was completely destroyed, they would ensure that the United States was also completely destroyed. Of course, this is terrible, but that's where we are. This motive for early time pit production has nothing to do with pit aging. Of course, it has to do with greed, contractor greed, and the related matter of pork for congresspersons, their career. But it really is mostly about acquisition of quantitative and qualitative military capabilities. I'll return to, some of the other, I could mention them now. This exercises the defense industrial base and allows it to grow and develop capabilities. That's a major goal. I have already mentioned money. It's triggered by the aging of the W-78 warhead and its incompatibility with the new weapons system. But that's that's it's more that it's triggered by that. It is not being triggered by pit aging per se. This, I think, those cavalcade of reasons are why we have early industrial pit production. Now, I'm setting aside the other motives for pit technology sustainment, which was an earlier program and which is part of the current. It's an implicit goal of the current program. Those who are managing this effort will want to maintain pit production technology, pass it on to new workers, perfect techniques, perfect technologies and equipment, all of that. But doing that does not require a 30 pit per year, 20 pit per year, or really possibly even a 10 pit per year reliable production ticket mandate. So those are goals of plutonium modernization, which are relatively uncontroversial and run across all of the policy options. I should stop there before going on to pit aging and see if there's questions, comments, anything about that. We could do that for now. And Trish will unmute people as needed.
Raise your hand.
Yeah, please raise your hand. If you have your picture there, we can see the hand, but I think there's.
Yeah, I can see the hand if
Okay, electronically.
electronically.
Yeah.
I don't see any questions right now if you want to go on ahead.
Okay, I'll go on ahead. I want to talk about pit aging. Pit aging is not the main driver of either plutonium pit production as an industrial effort, which is implied, or you could say reliable plutonium pit production. So what is? Now, we've already discussed some of it. New military capabilities, both qualitative and quantitative, warhead aging and incompatibilities, exercising and, in some eyes, growing the defense industrial base, money, political identification and careers, of course. There's a partisan side to this, operating very strongly. Los Alamos pit production is favored by Democrats, and more so than Republicans. Yes, pit aging is a motive, which increases as years go by. For preparations for plutonium pit production, you've got to think about that in a slightly different way. Imagine, before we get to how long pits last, take whatever figure that you want to, and then for the earliest needed date for the new pits for that particular weapon system, then you have to subtract 20 or 30 years for the lifetime of the warhead, which would replace that pit. In other words, if the pit is going to crap out in year X, then the people designing the program to replace the warhead with the new pit are going to want that warhead to last at least 20 years. They would prefer 30 years. It's expensive and disruptive to redo a warhead all the way down to putting in a new pit. That's a complete redo. So then if you're going to make a new pit for this new warhead, you have to factor in the time needed for the design and the construction, and then the process proven for whatever facility or facilities are going to be used. That time is about 2 decades, about 20 years. So it's about 15 years to design from scratch, construct such a facility, and then you've got all the prove-in time, which was already in the 70s. It was already about 3 years, but I think it's let's say, 5 years, round number, so 20 years. So you, in other words, if you think a warhead will last until year X, and you have to understand that the people who make the decisions about this are not going to make an optimistic decision. They're going to make a decision that they're very confident about. They're not going to allow, except per force, a situation to develop where the US has warheads that don't work. So take the earliest date, and then you have to subtract either 40 or 50 years before that date, if you have no pit facility that's operating. If you have a pit facility that's not operating, well, then it's only 25 or 35 years. But that's what the military, DOD, DOE are looking at, is that X minus 40 to 50 years. That's why they're in a panic. I would like them to have a much smaller, or in fact, zero arsenal. But they have to make this decision now based on the current political values in this country. So that's kind of disappointing, but that's the reality, and that's what they'll do. To do anything else would commit the country to forced disarmament on the schedule of the unknown schedule of pit aging, and not just pit aging, but to go back, warhead aging and weapon system aging and obsolescence. So the warheads are crafted to the delivery system. All of these things change. So the country is not going to commit to unilateral disarmament. That's not in the cards right now. On the subject of aging of pits per se, the best popular article is the one in Physics Today by David Kramer, and who's here. And then the NNSA fact sheet, which is more recent, I think. I don't have the date of Physics Today, just this right in front of me. I guess what I want to say about that is that we don't get to interpret this ourselves. We must rely on metallurgists who work on plutonium and people who we give clearances to and pay to understand the aging, not just of plutonium, but of pits overall. And as a political matter and as a matter of intellectual integrity, we have to go with what they think. Marvin Adams is one such person. And as he,
Who is he?
Marvin Adams, the number 2 in NNSA, the one head of defense programs. He was a Jason, and when he said that the 2006 unclassified summary was more sanguine than the underlying paper, we have no choice but to agree. And I might, as a matter of character assessment, and I'm just going to say I don't think that Marvin Adams is going to lie outright on this matter. And there may be people in government who do that, but he's not one of them, I don't think. And in any case, it doesn't matter because we don't have this information. When I read the 2006 Jason study, unclassified material, along with what was said about it by DoD and others afterward, which we have collected on a single web page, I don't get 100 years. I get 80 or more. So long before Marvin Adams took this job, I was working with 80 or more. So I don't get 100. We need to look at the language carefully. There are qualifiers in there. And obviously, there's also discussion there of the Livermore work on plutonium coupons, 150-year figure for the metal alone. We had a back and forth with Los Alamos about that back in the day when that came out. And I mean, I guess I just want to say, and the Physics Today article is very good on this. Plutonium metal is not the same as a pit, and pits have other issues. And I spent some time in Washington asking people about this. Of course, it's classified. And we can use our imaginations as to what some of those issues are. Just people who have studied them can tell me that those issues exist. And I don't want to sort of go into what they might be here beyond what the cladding, the plating, I think there could be vibrational issues, but that's just pure speculation on my part. Again, those are not issues related to plutonium metal alone. But the main point, which I would return to, is that pit aging is not the main driver of pit production. It is a complex managerial situation that is created by changes in the stockpile, the importance of the workforce, and in the short run, the desire for new military capabilities. That's all I would start out by saying on that topic. If there's questions or comments, raise your hands. All right, then we'll go on to Trish, you're watching all this.
Yes.
Okay, because I can't see him. Let's go on to this question of why did the NNSA decide 6 years ago never to build 2 pit factories and to never depend on Los Alamos's plutonium facility? And then why did they change their mind? I think most people who are dipping into this don't realize that NNSA made a formal decision at the secretarial, program secretarial officer level not to split production between 2 sites, as subsequently was chosen. As background, you should understand that for construction line items, I think it's all construction line items, certainly large ones, under DOE Order 413.3b, they have to do an analysis of alternatives. So after establishing the need for something to solve some mission need, then they have to look at alternatives. how can we satisfy this need? So they have to write an AOA. They did that. It spanned the Obama administration and the Trump administration. The person in charge of that effort was General Klotz, who was head of NNSA at the time, appointed by Obama and carried over for the first year of the Trump administration. And they looked at a lot of options for pit production. At that time, the idea of splitting pit production that come up, and they see. I started with that. They said, as they pointed out, these alternatives to split production would capitalize on the capability for 30 pit production that is currently being installed in PF4 by the Plutonium Sustainment Program and supplement it with new capabilities somewhere else. That was an oversimplification, as we've learned, but that's the basic idea. To get to 80 pits per year at high confidence, the equipment needed to get to 30 pits per year at high confidence must be added to PF4. And that would be 7 pieces of equipment, 2,000 square feet. But all told, to split production requires almost 70 pieces more total equipment, requires additional reconfiguration of PF4, and adds long-term production risks and surveillance costs due to multiple production lines. The savings provided by the reduction of 6,350 square feet in the production facility is marginal and is offset by the above configuration. So for that reason, they said, no, we're not going to split production. To simplify all that, plutonium pit production is an industrial process that has gigantic economies of scale. So to have a pit production facility at all costs, well, now we know, tens of billions, more than $10 billion. And so that entry-level fee, as it were, is gigantic. And until 2018, no one had really seriously ever thought about building 2 little Rocky Flatses to replace the capability that we had in the one facility. We're not building 2 uranium processing facilities. We're not building 2 lithium facilities, or anything else. So that's a matter of economies of scale and, as they point out, risk. That's the opposite of resilience, which we hear so much about. I myself do not buy the resilience argument, but that's I'm telling you what they said, so I'll skip that. And why do they say that we cannot rely on PF4 for enduring pit production? They, at the time, were looking at an 80 pit per year, the full load on PF4, but many of the arguments are the same. And these considerations, which NNSA said in 2017, are repeated multiple times in subsequent NNSA publications, even after the 2018 decision. PF4 was constructed in the I'm quoting from NNSA, constructed in the mid-1970s with a planned useful lifetime of 50 years. It began operations in 78, at which time it had ample margin to accommodate changes in safety and regulatory requirements. Over the last 35 years or more, that margin has been consumed with increasingly stringent nuclear safety requirements. By the time 80-year capability could be established, the building would be over 50 years old. Well, by the time a 20 pit per year capability is going to be established, the building will be over 50 years old. It will be problematic for PF4 to support additional changes in safety, risk tolerance, additional manufacturing activity, higher capacity for other missions such as pit reuse and rework, etc. And and they go on, and you can find that again in our paper on the featured section of the pit website dated June 9th, toward a viable production plan, or you can go back and read it directly in the 2017 NNSA analysis of alternatives. There is no, weirdly, there is no analysis of alternatives written by NNSA which supports the present pit production plan. So that's strange. They are supposed to have one, but of course, only Department of Energy is there to enforce its own regulations. The Savannah River part of this plan was analyzed in this AOA, but the notion of establishing an enduring pit production facility at Los Alamos in PF4 was explicitly rejected by NNSA in 2017. And as they say there in the executive summary of that report, when Los Alamos is done with, I'm paraphrasing, when an adequate enduring pit production facility is set up, PF4 can return to the research and development mission for which it was built. Subsequently, in fact, just recently, we got by FOIA a report to Congress about risks to longevity of PF4, which is on our website. Unbeknownst to me, PF4 was designed initially to have only 100 employees working there. And as the report to Congress says, they have 1,000. That was in 2020, I think that report was. And all told, there will be more than that once you get 2 production shifts. In fact, there are more than that now because the facility is operating 24/7 and has been for almost 2 years.
You got it.
So
Couple hands.
now we have, so that's hold on, let me just try to stay somewhat organized. So that is the third bullet that we said we'd talk about. Why did they change their mind? Let me just finish that before taking questions. I believe they changed their minds for primarily 2 reasons. I used to say 1 reason, which was the 1.5 reasons. The New Mexico delegation, when they saw that statement in the AOA that, and they looked at the relative timeframes and costs, which disfavored Los Alamos, they had a fit. And thinking of themselves as heirs to the Dominici legacy, they began organizing in the New Mexico delegation and on the Armed Services Committee, where Senator Heinrich was, to promote Los Alamos as a pit factory. And President Trump's appointee as head of NNSA, Lisa Gordon-Hegarty, decided she could solve the political problem by by splitting the baby and giving some to everybody. Well, that was not the motive of Senator Inhofe, who was involved in this. And that, I thought at the time, had to do with the production of the W-87-1 and Senator Fisher. And I at first only saw that as a new warhead for the Air Force, but now I think we see that it provides a new military capabilities, both qualitative and quantitative. So that was also involved. So that's why they changed their mind from lobbying from Senator Heinrich and other Democrats, and then the nuclear weapons hawks who saw a need and indeed an opportunity to add new military capabilities. Now, questions, comments?
Okay, Willard Hunter had a question.
Yes.
A moment ago.
Okay, Willard, go ahead. Wherever you are. You're muted.
Quick question. Was there any equipment that was salvaged from Rocky Flats that could be used for modern pit production?
I can only answer that partially. Yes, equipment was brought down to Los Alamos from Rocky Flats in sometime in the early 90s under the direction of Sig Hecker. Whether that equipment is still, useful in any way, I sort of doubt it. I should mention that at that time, Los Alamos had a plan to build a large pit facility, which some of us worked to stop, which we did. That I can tell you the size of that thing, but it'd take me a second to look it up. It was called the Special Nuclear Materials Research and Development Laboratory. It was in the same place. It was approximately same size as the later Chemistry and Metallurgy Research Replacement Nuclear Facility. And that equipment was to be part of preservation of pit production and then possibly augmentation of pit production using the big new facility.
Okay, and Bushrod has a question.
Yes, Bushrod, go ahead.
Can you unmute yourself, Bushrod?
It's really not a question, Greg. It's a comment.
Okay.
It's we're talking in my credible naivete. I asked Representative Chandler, whose district is Los Alamos, why are we building weapons we can't use? And she said, well, because the Russians are building weapons they can't use. And as you quoted, the Pentagon does tests that plan for the future, and they don't plan to lose the war, so they plan on the first strike and who will be left after the first strike. I very much liked your previous web contributor, Dr. Starr, who outlined the fireball of a hydrogen bomb as opposed to an atomic bomb. And you named, I believe you named in one of your posts, the hydrogen bomb, the hell bomb, because most of us, if they're used, won't be here afterwards. And we enter, it seems to me, my comment is we enter into the craziness of our representatives when we say, well, we need to be more efficient, or it's costing too much, or that we have a personnel problem, all of which is true. But the end goal is suicidal. And I would like us to persuade people or inform people that if these things are used, we won't be here afterwards, most of us. And the livability of the planet will be severely constrained to about 20% of the present population. About 6 billion of us will perish in a nuclear winter, and 2 billion of us might survive. So Greg, I follow some of your arguments, but I think we need to impress people that they're going to die if this continues. And I know you agree. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bushrod.
Willard has another question.
Okay, before I take Willard again, let me see anybody else there.
Nobody right now.
Okay, go ahead, Willard.
The RAND Corporation runs lots of simulations for the military. What are the results of the RAND Corporation studies relative to global nuclear war?
I don't know the answer to that question. We prefer our own to RAND's, and I would I guess add to something that Bushrod said. There's, and I, in one of the recent press articles, it was in the Scientific American. It was a wonderful analysis by Sebastian Philippe at Program on Science and Global Security at Princeton, which I am sort of an alum, and it's looking at the health impacts of strikes on U.S. missile fields. It was, but that's an unrealistically small scenario, and as it wouldn't take, in my opinion, more than a handful of nuclear weapons to destroy the entire United States and kill nearly everyone in it. I don't think the assumptions of that particular study were, if you narrow the object of a study enough, you can get a result like that. But it's not a realistic scenario for a nuclear war, and it omits a lot of the other effects. Bushrod alluded to some of them. Steve did as well. He has a nice book on EMP. The US electrical grid is fragile. And if the grid goes down and the big expensive parts in the grid, the big transformers and others, even the little insulators on the poles, get burned out if there's enough current on those wires. And there are millions of them. And people die. People will die quickly without electricity over wide areas. They won't be able to get water. They won't be able to get fuel. They won't be able to do anything. During the Cold War, there were people who studied nodal targeting. Kostatsipis at MIT. It doesn't take a lot. Well, one more recent, William Perry did a kind of a little scenario of a terrorist bomb, a Hiroshima-sized bomb, coupled with threats that there would be more, which would induce, in his opinion, panic and overload a lot of systems in the United States and induce financial collapse and basically bring an end to the economy of the United States as we know it. Well, I think that's realistic. And I don't think that the United States can absorb dozens or hundreds of nuclear explosions in an attack. I don't think that our defense establishment, which to some degree includes a program on science and global security at Princeton, has the most compelling or credible studies. I think we can do better than that ourselves.
Jesse Emerson has a question.
Yes, I wondered where the parts for this production comes from. Does it come from China like everything else?
That's a really good question. So first, narrowly, for pits, the plutonium parts would come from, at first, just Los Alamos, then later also Savannah River under the present plan. I should say, and I hate to drop this bombshell in here without, only put a big bold box around it or something. Last time I was in Washington, I spoke with a senior staff member who said that Los Alamos pit production was temporary. And that when PF4 became unable to do the mission, all the production would go to South Carolina, that there was no plan to do anything else. So the plutonium, to return to your question, is handled in these particular expensive, complex facilities. Other parts could be made along with it here at Los Alamos. There are efforts to make some of the non-plutonium parts in other facilities. That capability exists in small scale now. Even private machine shops have been involved in exploring that option for some of the pit parts. The pit parts are made at the Kansas City plant they are or will be in Kansas City, Missouri. But your broader question about supply chains in the warhead as a whole and in the missile system as a whole is terribly relevant. Assembling and maintaining and stabilizing those supply chains for the nuclear weapons enterprise as a whole is very difficult, and people are trying very hard to do that. It's not just the exotic materials, but it's concrete, rebar, plywood. I heard a speaker say that from one of the sites that it's very difficult to run a big construction project in the nuclear weapons business when you find out one morning that there is no plywood to be had. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one, what are some of the geographic, engineering, and managerial realities which ensure that the nuclear weapons establishment will never abandon the Savannah River pit plutonium processing facility until the U.S. doesn't need pits? I've covered this in the past, and so it's let me see here. Going to have to more or less wing it. Los Alamos can't make enough pits for the stockpile. They can't, in two senses. The rate of pit production is not enough to sustain a life extension program. If you try to figure out what the lifetime production of pits at Los Alamos could be, assuming that, as in the 2020 report on risks to sustainment of PF4, they say, well, if we invest properly in PF4, we could sustain it until 2045. We think. The previous number was 2039. Okay. How many pits could Los Alamos make by 2045? Well, 500 or 600, and is about the number. We have about 3,800, 4,000 warheads in the stockpile right now. So asking Congress to depend on Los Alamos is asking Congress to commit itself, Los Alamos alone, is asking Congress to commit itself to an arsenal which is 6 or 7 times smaller than at present over the long run. They won't do it. The other reason related to that is that 2045 comes very quickly. When you're talking about building a plutonium facility, they don't have anything else waiting in the wings, which would be faster, better than the SRPPF in South Carolina. Another category of reasons has to do with the numerous problems that Los Alamos carries with it. One senior analyst in government called Los Alamos pit production a sucking chest wound for all of its problems. The labor force in the region is inadequate. The transportation system to bring the workers to the site is inadequate. The geography is very unforgiving. The site is not very big as the plutonium atom drifts, so that the facility ends up being only about 3,000 feet from members of the public from their homes. The canyon mesa topography makes everything complicated. There's only a small amount of space on the plutonium mesa. Construction there gets in the way of and may prevent environmental cleanup of area C and area G and other disposal areas in the Pajarito corridor, which are cleanup of some of these sites really is part of the social contract that DOE has made with the people here and the Indian Pueblos. Speaking of the Indian Pueblos, there are about 2,000 archaeological sites within the laboratory. Many of these are considered sacred, and some are actively used ritually and are part of maintaining the Tewa world. The San Ildefonso Pueblo has a sacred area congressionally established that directly abuts the facilities on Pajarito Mesa there, and they are directly downstream and downwind. And should there ever be a leadership in that tribe that wants to go after the lab, the legal tools are there for them to use. There are security problems associated with the proximity of the Los Alamos plutonium facility to residences and businesses. Infantry handheld weapons can reach the plutonium facility from the town. The topography makes it easy to sneak. I have snuck many times. Times have changed, but my first date with Trish involved a nun drive, a 80-some-odd-year-old nun driving a rental car, and us powerless to change her mind. And we ended up driving all over behind the plutonium facility, looking out through the security gates. It was a very scary experience, but not one single guard ever appeared. Los Alamos has failed security audits, and the topography is such that from public highways, you can overlook the whole thing. If someone wanted to hurt Los Alamos, it would be a very easy site to do that. So those are some of the inherent problems. Construction at a contaminated facility is very expensive and slow. Los Alamos itself likens itself to what they're trying to do as the same as doing an overhaul and upgrade on a jetliner in the air with passengers aboard. That's about right. I could. Part of the problem is that Los Alamos sits on the western boundary of Los Alamos is a fairly large earthquake fault, which you can see if you're there, or you can see it from an airplane very clearly, capable of accelerations on the order of those experienced at the Fukushima power plant. These accelerations are much greater than those expected during the design of most Los Alamos facilities, and some of which still do not meet seismic standards, including some of the facilities needed for pit production, like the Sigma building. So Los Alamos is a problematic site. Under the Trump administration, someone in the White House joked that there was a joke in the White House that it would be simpler to build a pit factory in Albuquerque in pieces and take it to Los Alamos by rail than to build one up there. To which I said, there is no such rail line. And the person I was talking to said, yes, that's the point. You could build a railroad too. It would still be cheaper. So anyway, those are some of the issues, and I know I'm kind of winging that, but it's not a comprehensive list. But now I think we can go on to some other questions.
Jesse Emerson.
Yes, Jesse, go ahead.
Well, this isn't a question, but in considering all the people that the lab wants to bring up to Los Alamos, housing is one consideration because I used to live up there and there is not enough. And education for the people that are that are coming in. And I think the hospital services. Hospitals right now, and I'm a retired nurse. I just retired at age 77. Wow. And I know that there is a nurse shortage. There's a CNA shortage. And I guess it won't make any difference if they drop the bomb because none of that will do any good. But those are just other things to consider when they're thinking about this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Those are really important, and it affects recruitment at the lab. All those things are affecting. I mean, a local businessman told us of a friend of his who was a visiting British scientist, which LANL was very happy to get, but he left. He citing some of the things that you talk about. People in Los Alamos are seeing the schools, the school teachers being sucked into the lab. They will need, according to Los Alamos Lab, 4,100 people to, well, that's full-time equivalents, to staff the pit production project. They're hiring like mad from anywhere they can get people, and they're pulling them out of local businesses, out of schools, and then at the same time, the quality of life and the accessibility of services that health and other are diminishing.
Jean Stevens has a question.
Yes, Jean.
Hi, to go back with your discussion about the seismic activity at LANL, you compared it to Fukushima, so that would be like an 8-point earthquake?
No, I didn't mean to do that. The accelerations experienced at the plant, not the in the ocean. So the accelerations that were experienced at the plant, which is far from, not right at the earthquake fault. It's not so it's 7.2, something like that, was more or less the maximum at Los Alamos.
And if there was a 7.2 earthquake at the lab and there had been a criticality event, I live 45 miles downwind in Taos, what would be the scenario that would occur?
Mhm. In Taos, Taos is far, so plutonium oxide is heavy, and probably Taos would not be contaminated. The risk lies for those people who are living, let's say, within a mile. And then there also, the safety board also wanted the laboratory to look at multiple hazard events. So, for example, if there's a big earthquake like that, you can expect the power poles to be snapped or trees to be snapped and fall on power lines. If this occurs during a dry month, which we have a lot of, then you have a forest fire also, in addition to an earthquake. You expect the two roads that provide access to the lab to be the western one to be blocked. Certainly the Main Hill Road would be blocked, and maybe the truck route would be open. But a report from long ago pointed out that facilities like the hospital, which is situated on the edge of a mesa, might fall. So there's a lot of earthquake hazards that are related, but probably Taos is not going to be contaminated.
So if there were a fire like Las Conchas, it came, 3 miles from the lab, if I remember correctly. So had it overtaken the lab, which was certainly a possibility in 2011, what would be the effects of that?
Well, it depends on a number of things. There was a fire which did burn about a third of the lab. I'm blanking on the name of this fire. Let's not in 2000.
Cerro Grande,
yeah. And there were, that fire burned to the edge of the parking lot, to the back fence of PF4. And so there was a pretty hair-raising deal. There was kind of a firefighter's last stand there. And it depends in part on how many trees Los Alamos cuts down around its facilities. So there's a tension there between having a nice looking campus to attract people and having a fireproof campus.
So if there was a fire at the plutonium facility, a major fire like had happened at Rocky Flats, which I believe may have had some contamination on Denver.
Yes.
What is your thoughts on that?
I don't think Taos would be involved. And so the effects of the risks and safety issues are primarily localized and fall most heavily on workers, co-located workers. And there is a debate about whether they would affect people in the town of Los Alamos. But beyond that, it gets more and more iffy, and you have to kind of invent possible safety scenarios, which the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board and really I myself don't think are all that credible.
We need to take a question from Kay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. I'm mostly focused on the back end of the nuclear power industry. That's my face here.
Yes.
I'm wondering what the waste stream is that comes out of Los Alamos with this or in other facilities related to the pit protection, and the prospect of where that waste would go. Does it go to WIP or what?
Can you believe, Kale, that I have not used the word waste in this anywhere here yet? That's pathetic, and thank you for raising it. There is a lot of transuranic waste generated from pit production. So transuranic waste and low-level waste and some hazardous waste are all products of this process. Los Alamos has a lot of transuranic waste stored on site already, and there is a concern about the adequacy of the storage facilities. Los Alamos currently, the disposition of that waste is that it goes to WIP. And, but it gets, Los Alamos has claims to only so many, some fraction of the shipments to WIP. And so there's a competition there. And there is also a kind of latent competition between the legacy waste, which is already at Los Alamos, and the newly generated waste, which is coming from preparations for pit production, and then will come from pit production itself. And there's quite a lot of political tension about this. We, of course, would prefer, and I think now there is thanks to the work of other organizations like CCNS, I think that there is now a regulatory preference for removal of legacy waste at Los Alamos prior to newly generated waste. And I wish I knew more about this. And of course, the devil is in the way that is administered. A very long time ago, that was my job, but that was a long time ago. So yes, now on the low-level waste question, that is all shipped off site at the moment, but Los Alamos has put into its organizational plan called the LANL agenda that they would like to open up a low-level nuclear waste disposal site by 2027. We are without any details on where that would be, or why, or anything else. We have worked many years to close the disposal site they had there. It has never been formally closed, but they don't dispose there right now. So that's a disappointment, and that's all part of the it's that ambition to open that dump is grouped under their pit production program.
Interesting. When you say competition for, space and WIP, right? Are you talking about the competition with Savannah River and what, Hanford and all the other facilities?
Yes, both competition with the other facilities and competition within the fraction available to LANL.
Exactly.
For the new and the old, yeah.
It's already over committed. And,
yeah,
right?
There's open, pit production provides a kind of an open-ended amount of waste that it's difficult to, I mean, they make estimates, but many people had the idea that WIP would only be for legacy waste, and unfortunately, that's not the case. There's also the waste from disposing of the old plutonium, which is significant, pretty significant. I should say that the pit production is not the only mission by a long shot that takes place in that plutonium facility. So there's a competition for space and competition for within the overall risk envelope that's allowed, called material at risk, within that facility, between pit production, oxidation of plutonium, preparation for disposal, making plutonium batteries for spacecraft and for nuclear weapons, and other missions. There's about 6 missions. And all of those are, in a way, competing with one another for within the safety envelope that will prevent the kind of problems that Jane Stevens was asking about.
Thanks so much for a really interesting presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, well, we should go on.
Yeah.
Why not just produce 10 or 20 pits per year at LANL for the time being, once production gets going, and pause or abandon the Savannah River project? Okay. Let's see. That is number 5. Again, we don't get to make this decisions, and so why is that not going to happen? Well, I think we covered some of it, but annual, what to make 10 or to make 20, let's start with 20 pits per year. 20 pits per year requires 24/7 work at LANL with 2 production shifts. The discovery of this, and I don't know how long NNSA or LANL actually knew this, our often expressed opinion is that when LANL management realized that to reach as low as 20 pits per year, they were going to have to run their facility 24/7 with 2 production shifts and a maintenance shift. That's when they should have picked up the phone and called NNSA and said, no, this will break us. This is a completely different kettle of fish than anything that this research lab ever had in mind. 20 pits per year is going to require more than 4,000 workers. The annual costs are going to be $1 billion a year. That's exclusive of any future line item construction to expand or replace the plutonium facility. But 20 pits per year is very far less than could sustain the stockpile or supply a life extension program at a pace which is workable for NNSA and its other sites. So as far as production goes, it's absurdly low. As a technology demonstration or for training purposes, well, you don't need it. Again, there's a really big distinction between a reliable production system, an industrial production, a factory, and making some pits on a craft basis, a benchtop or demonstration basis. So for training purposes, you don't need this 20 pits per year. The 30 pits per year, if you want to go up there, that's not really enough for the stockpile either, as we already said. And so that would, in these kind of numbers, lead to a kind of a tacit self-disarmament, which we want, but that, that's not worth a bucket of warm spit in Washington, so we won't get it. 10 pits per year, and I don't think this is widely known. The program to get to 10 pits per year is funded separately from the program to get to 20 or 30 pits per year. So our pal Frank von Hippel, wrote a paper, why not produce 10 to 20 pits per year? Well, there's a huge difference between 10 and 20. 20 leads you to the 24/7 work. 10 was what Los Alamos was charged to do as an interim, to have that capability as an interim pit production site, starting in December 1996 until September 2020. So there, the official maximum, the official maximum during that year was 20. During all those years was 20, but in practice, they really never exceeded 10. I think they made 11 one year in the early aughts, or around 2010. The problem with these low numbers of industrial production is that you're getting even fewer pits for almost the same investment. So 20 pits per year is going to roughly double the cost per pit. And to a point where the military is going to say, and again, this is PF4 has a finite lifetime. And so the number of pits you will get from the facility at this lower rate is even fewer than before. Now, part of this plan idea would be that you would pause Savannah River and then restart it if research showed that you need to do that. The problem with that plan is that Savannah River is already on a schedule that if you do that little exercise of subtracting the warhead lifetime from when you think you might need the pits, you discover that long about 2040, you better really have a pit facility running unless you want to use the unavailability of pits to constrain the nuclear arsenal in advance. So which we might want to do, but that is not something that DoD is going to do. Alicia Guzman interviewed Peter Fonta. No, she used an interview with Peter Fonta, who was head of nuclear weapons in the Pentagon under Trump. And he said, look, just, it's classified, but just take 4,000 weapons in the arsenal, divide by 80 pits per year, and you get 50 pits or 50 years of production to replace those pits. Well, these facilities are typically designed for a 50-year life. The trouble with the 10, there are just a lot of problems with the 10 to 20, whatever that may mean. You have to really take them separately. And I should say that if you were to disband, I am talking like them because they are making the decisions, not me. Let's say that let's just say I was in charge of NNSA and I disband the stockpile stewardship and, disband the Savannah River pit production, plutonium processing facility design team and stop the construction. And they said, well, we'll come back to this in 5 years if we need to. We'll have the Jasons do another study and we'll determine whether we actually need this and maybe we need a smaller facility. All those people will go get another job. Some will retire. The number of people who know how to design a pit production facility are very small. It's a rare thing. They are not young. That expertise will end. You'll never get that design team back. Jesse asked a question about supply chains and China, and the equipment will change. So you design a glove box to match a certain piece of equipment. Well, you come back to this problem in 5 or 10 years, that piece of equipment doesn't exist anymore. There's another different piece of equipment. It has different requirements. And you have to redesign the glove box for the new requirements. And maybe you have to change the electrical or the plumbing. The reality of the matter is that if you stop for 5 years, you're almost starting over. And that's, it's not a value statement, it's just a fact. So it would be true for designing some wonderful renewable energy plant, or it's true for pit production. And so the idea of suspending a gigantic project like that for any length of time is really equal to canceling it altogether. And that is not what's going to happen. In fact, Congress has been loading that project up with extra money to try to solve some of the supply chain problems by making sure that the long lead procurements can be started and contracts issued so that the supply base actually exists rather than goes out of business. So that Congress gave Savannah River last year an extra $500 million for long lead procurement because NNSA said it would really help get this project to keep it on track. So both the politics and the management realities are such that pausing that project basically is equivalent to canceling it. And if you leave the entire pit production of the United States resting on Los Alamos, it's a very, very rickety base in a facility which is already at its design lifetime, original design lifetime, as well as capacity, with a whole host of problems. And that's why the proposed policy is not going to be of Frank and Curtis Asplund is not going to be implemented. And so what happens from a practical perspective, when people make that proposal, they say, oh, well, let's just do it all at Los Alamos. That goes nowhere in the real world. It's a kind of a fantasy left over from the 1990s. So it almost made sense in the 1990s. So PF4 was a lot, just think about it. PF4 was a lot younger. The pits were a lot younger. As Frank said to the Guardian, it seemed like the US was on a glide path toward nuclear disarmament. Looks like we were headed in that direction to smaller and smaller arsenals. Well, we were up to a point, although no one really ever thought that the nuclear weapons problem was going away. So it made a lot more sense in the 1990s, but the pits are older. The pits which could be used recycled, which are in storage, which is a problematic thing, but there are some possibilities. All of those alternatives are getting more difficult as time goes on, just as a matter of fact. So, so I guess we could look at this proposal of limiting production of 10 to 20 pits per year at Los Alamos as a kind of a goodbye to all that, a kind of a look back to the 1990s when Yeltsin was in charge of Russia and we were in charge of Yeltsin, and more or less, and all these factors were more suitable, but right now it's not realistic. And I'm sorry, I distracted myself from the main point, which is that promoting Los Alamos as the sole pit plant has the political result of having two pit plants. It says yes to Los Alamos, but is incapable and impotent to say no to Savannah River. So it ends up being a yes to something that doesn't have to be, which also happens to be totally essential for the W87-1 MIRV warhead for ICBMs. In this stack and on our website, and suppose that I can land on it. Lisa Gordon Hegarty writes to Liz Cheney that Los Alamos pit production is absolutely essential for the W87-1 warhead. And you can almost identify the two things because Los Alamos production up until about 2036 or later is only going to be devoted to the W87-1 warhead. It's very difficult to change types of warheads. It would make a big hiccup, would have to have QA. So when we naively endorse early pit production, thinking that that's all that's necessary, you end up inadvertently endorsing exactly what Senator Inhofe and Liz Cheney and Senator Fisher want, which is a MIRVed, highly accurate warhead that can be built to put on the Sentinel system. So stop there for questions.
Don't have any hands up right now,
Okay.
so you can move on to the next.
Okay, the next and last topic is costs, and which is right here somewhere. Here. And I don't have this is not on our website. And not explicitly, but you can think, I'll lead you through this very quickly. There is on our website a cost sheet using NNSA's congressional budget request, what pit production will cost, and with our extrapolations from there. Reminding ourselves of where we started, which is that the information available in public keeps evolving. And we just had another iteration of news when the GIO published its assessments of major projects in August that pushed back the completion dates another 6 months. You have to make a number of assumptions to come up with a pit cost. Let me tell you the bottom line, which is that under a range of assumptions, pits produced at Los Alamos will cost between 80 and 150, is it 150, 150, between about 80 and $150 million a piece. I use $100 million just as a ballpark number. Those assumptions involved are that the sunk costs in the preparation process are included. They are about, at this point, 30% of the total costs are already sunk. And future startup costs are included up to whatever point of time you cut this off. I assume total reliability once 30 pit per year is established. And I omit any need to start building replacement or augmentation nuclear facilities, which is a very optimistic assumption. And so that's how you get to $100 million. You have to make scenarios to decide how many pits you think Los Alamos will make during the startup process. So, for example, decent guess would be 151 pits by 2032. If you do that, and with those other assumptions, that's $133 million per pit. If you use a longer time frame through 2039, you can get it down to $85 million a pit. But then you're starting to push on the maximum lifetime of PF4. So you really can't get it much lower than that. These pit costs are not included in NNSA's estimates of its warhead costs. So the total cost of the W87-1 program to make these new warheads that go on the Sentinel missile is 15.9 billion in then year dollars. So 15.9 billion for the warheads, but that's not including the pits. The pits will greatly increase that cost, more than double the cost of the warhead if those pits come from LANL. At present, the higher cost of LANL pits is deemed worth it because of the advantages of speed. And then after that, once Savannah River gets going, of secondary production capability. And like I said, I don't buy the idea that having two facilities, one of which is Los Alamos, adds resilience. So that's about what pits cost. It's really obscene. Here in New Mexico, the starting salary of a school teacher is $46,000. So one pit is greater, is roughly the same price tag as 2,000 entry-level teachers for 1 year. A program to weatherize the homes of poor people in the state was just announced, $3.5 million. Well, that's 3.5% of one pit. And honestly, just to be quite frank, I don't think the United States can survive with these kind of priorities. We're now spending, I know I'm drifting off just a little bit, but we're spending about $7,600 per household per year on defense right now. So it's about $1 trillion a year now, in a period when we are experiencing exponential growth in debt service. And this is not really off topic, because between debt service and resource limitations and climate change, it is difficult for me to see how the United States will be making pits in the late 2030s, no matter what the policy is. So there's basically larger forces acting here than Congress or the military. They're going to have to respond to these larger forces just as we are. And I think it's very important for us to, and this will be my concluding remarks before the questions, to cut down the belief that the United States can conduct a nuclear arms race with Russia, let alone Russia, China combined, under the present multiple crises that the United States now faces. With going up to 60,000 feet looking at this, what the Congressional Commission on Strategic Posture is doing, some of what they say is insightful. Yes, we're losing the defense industrial base. We get that. Yep, it's true. But trying harder to be the global hegemon is not the answer. You can't pull all the electricians in New Mexico, in northern New Mexico, to Los Alamos to fix up PF4 and expect to have a sustainable society. You can't hire away all the talented people and expect to have a viable economy. You can't fund these types of priorities and expect to have a you know, it will be the old story of empire all along, that we hollow ourselves out in the attempt to maintain and our power. The alternative being some kind of cataclysmic nuclear war, which Bushrod rightly said, none of us are likely to survive. So the folly of it is overwhelming, it's staggering. And from where we sit, we believe it's important to cut the belief that the United States can maintain a nuclear deterrent if that means an effective and predominating nuclear war fighting capability, because we can't. It never was a viable idea, and it's even a less viable idea now, and will drive us into the ground faster than ever. So we are, in a way, those of us who wish to postpone pit production, we believe it's managerially the best idea, but we're making a wager as well, and that the extra 10 years will make a very great difference in whether and how many pits the United States decides to make. And we are also, and this goes, you know, I'm sorry, this is a little contradictory, but everything about nuclear weapons is contradictory. So we want to delaying pit production is a teaching moment for the United States as the would-be arbiter of the global rules-based order. Sorry, that wasn't all that articulate, but anyway, you get some idea of our thinking.
Are there any questions? Not that I see.
Oh gosh,
Okay.
was it that bad?
Okay.
No comments for now?
Comments, questions? Nope. Okay.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, all of you, for your generous gifts of time and attention. We'll try to get more of this online so it's easier to refer to. There will be, Trisha's been recording this, so
Yes.
hopefully that will be up somewhere. And really, really appreciate all of you and all that you're doing in the other venues that you're working for the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.